Three elements that we need to focus on, right? When I say we, I mean students, I mean educators, I mean parents, everybody, right? We need to start practicing choice making skills, decision making skills. We need to start working on self regulation, right? How we're controlling our own behaviors. Um, and then internal locus of control is that eventual feeling that leads to autonomy, is that belief that, I as an individual have some control over my situation. And so how do we make autonomy happen? How do we get there? Okay. And this is what you're going to hear today from our youth leaders and from Kendall, right? Autonomy is about building in choices. Okay. So if you're an educator and you have an assignment, is there choice built in? If I need to demonstrate that I know the content, there are numerous ways I can do it. Can I take a test? Can I write an essay? Can I make a video? What are my choices, right? Problem solving opportunities. Are we taking time, and youth as well, are we taking time to learn how to solve a problem? Now, I say, are we taking time? Because as an adult, sometimes if my two daughters get into a fight, I can solve the problem really quick, right? It'll take 2 seconds and they're both in their rooms and problem's over, except no one actually learned anything, right? And what happens is that same problem is going to happen again. And how are we going to learn from it? How are we going to learn to problem solve our way out of it? Next one is setting goals. Um, are we setting short-term and long-term goals? And more importantly, um, are they goals that I, as the individual, so if Chloe tells me that she's going to set a goal for me to run a marathon, except that I hate running, I'm not going to work real hard on that goal, right? I want to pick my own goal to work on. Once I have that goal, do we have a plan in place for how I'm going to reach it? Because it's just not magically going to happen because I want it. Okay. So, do we have a plan in place? And then, most importantly, this one's really for everyone to really understand allowing failure as a learning experience. Okay. Failure is not a dirty word. I know a lot of you sitting in school right now are thinking, yeah, it is. If I fail a test or fail a class, I'm going to get in trouble or I'm going to be behind, right? And so we need to understand that the whole point we're in school is to learn, right? Nobody walks into school as an expert. Okay. We need to take the mindset of, I'm not perfect. As an adult, I experience failure every week. The key is I assess what went wrong. Okay. And then I make a new plan and try again. And so understanding that, students, you don't have to be perfect, right? You'll hear from Chloe and Chad and Jonathan, right? Who are, I'm sure just like me, talking about mistakes they make all the time. And then the next step is, how do you fix it? So the entry level piece for I'm Determined is the idea of the one pager. And so the one pager is just, this is like step one of becoming autonomous. Okay. You as a student with a disability, or you as a teacher, or you as an adult, or whatever, you need to know what you're good at. You need to know what you're interested in. You need to know your preferences and what works for you. And you need to know what people can do to help you. Okay. Because if you don't know these things about yourself, we don't really need to talk about autonomy, because you'll never get there. Okay. You can't start making choices and being in control if you don't know what makes you tick. So, focusing on strengths, preference, interest, needs. If you go to the I'm Determined website, there's all sorts of resources to help you get there. Okay. Teachers, what we don't want to do is just hand this blank sheet like that to a kid and say, fill it in. Right. It's not helpful. Even adults, when I tell them write down 5 things they're good at, they all kind of look at me, right? And it's not, we don't live in a society a lot of times that where we're taught to always be aware of what we're good at, right? Now, if I told you to write down 5 things you can't do, everyone can do it in 2 seconds, right? We're trying to flip that. Let's focus on what I'm good at, what I enjoy doing, right? And then specifically how you can help me succeed, okay? That's step one in autonomy. I'm going to hand it over to Kendall now, who's going to moderate our panel. I am going to monitor the chat room because I really want this to be a conversation. So And these questions are open to anyone, students in the classroom, teachers, who's ever on this call. Please feel free to just type questions in the chat, and then Kendall and I will kind of monitor it and get to all of those questions, especially as some of these stories kind of spark, things you're wondering about, or similar stories you have. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kendall.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for having us. And I as everybody was getting on, I think, Undetermined generally gets on the call and you think that we're these people who have it all figured out in terms of self-determination and what works. I'm at home with my 3 kids and things are just as crazy as everybody else. And we're all kind of going through all this stuff together. And I think that, as I was listening to John talk, this idea of how do we start to like build autonomy into the classroom? And I think it's a lot of trial and error, even for us teachers. So as you educators are trying to figure out how to incorporate this, just realize it's like a lot about relationship building with your students, understanding what makes them tick, and then giving them space to kind of actually put their input into what you design in the classroom. So in some ways, what we're showing you here in the next half hour or so, where it's very conversational, is very indicative of the way that we generally operate in trying to build autonomy. So in light of like the whole narrative approach, I'm going to start, guys. I'm speaking to the youth leaders. I want you guys to tell me a little bit about an example or a short story of a time when you were given autonomy or acted with autonomy.
I'll go first. So for me, it was in high school when I was in an IEP meeting, and I was given the opportunity to actually complete a 1-pager. And from that point forward, I was able to share with my case manager what I needed in order to be successful throughout my 4 years of high school. So it was kind of like a roadmap for us and my case manager to be able to put the resources together for what I needed. And sometimes, there were some hiccups and I came up short and I failed to ask and advocate for when I needed help. And so that was just one example of when I began my autonomy journey.
Awesome.
Hey, Kendall, real quick, I believe so. And just so we get the lingo straight, in Texas, in Virginia, we call it the IEP meeting, and in Texas, we call it, I believe it's the ARD meeting, right?
That is correct.
Man, I'm gonna get my Texas badge. I remembered it. So when you hear the youth leaders say IEP meeting, everyone just that's the ARD meeting that we're talking about. Great, thanks, Jonathan.
I think for me, it's when I came to college. I'm a sophomore up here at James Madison University. And it was really different for me because I got to make all the choices. I got to choose when my classes were, when I got food, when I went to sleep, where I lived basically. And in high school, I really didn't get to do that until I kind of started going to Undetermined and learning about self-determination with my 504 meetings, which is a bit different from the IEP. But in college, I use notepads. I have a wall calendar right here. Just to help me stay organized. And that was a big thing that my mom tried to get me to do in high school. And I didn't listen to her. When I got to college, it was a big difference because you've got a lot more schedules to plan out. And it's rather, someone's not just breathing down your neck all the time. You've got to make the choices to be responsible because it's really easy to get ahead on your assignments and it's really easy to get behind on your assignments. So it's just, you're making that choice of how do I want to be throughout the semester? Do I want to be a really good student or do I want to be a really lazy student? So that was one of the examples.
Chat. Well, I want to return to that in a little bit because I think this idea of the consequences of you not doing that, you had to learn in that process, right? And so It comes back to this idea of failure. Sometimes the motivation to act autonomous has to come as a result of seeing, of experiencing failure around something that you want to have change. And that's where I think John makes a good point in that this idea of failure being a learning experience and really framing it that way. So chat, we'll come back to that one, but I like that. Chloe, I know you got a good story.
Okay. For
me, I was in third grade and had set the goal of walking across the stage at graduation in high school. Now, I know you're thinking, well, why can't you just do it? Oh, I'm in a power chair and my disability or gift, as I like to call it, doesn't allow me to walk like everybody else. So it was a big goal to be able to say, hey, I'm gonna walk across the stage.
Did everybody get a lot of that? Chloe and I are on like these wavelengths, so we understand each other, but I just want to make sure that everyone else got that. And what you'll learn to know in the next 20 minutes is that Chloe loves to prove people wrong and to push the envelope for every single thing that people have told her that she can accomplish or that she should be able to accomplish. And so this idea of autonomy being able to choose goals and actually like having other people work for you to make it happen. Something like walking across the stage is an excellent example of that. So we talked about like these stories of where you felt autonomous, but I want to hop back onto this idea of like, what are the barriers that oftentimes can prevent you from being autonomous or from learning how to be autonomous? What are the things that kind of prevent that from happening?
Teachers, it's an open question to any of you that have students or even you as educators.
It's a good one.
What your perspective might be on that particular question. And you guys are putting things in the chat, but you can certainly come off mic.
I have a student here with me who we were just talking about it. And I said, I asked him what keeps him from, you know, basically making his own decisions and doing things that he wants to do. And he says he doesn't ever get the chance to do it, that his parents are always doing it for him or his teachers are doing it for him. So I was like, good answer. So just not given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. That's a great point. And look, as a former special ed teacher, you know, I did that all the time. And a lot of times, you know, even as a parent when my kids were young, there's a lot of times where I just knew if I did it, it'd be faster, right? But what I realized, and it would be done my way. And so I would like how it was done. And what I realized is that, and you know, it took me a little while because I would have kids who had graduated and then they'd run into problems, right? But now they were out of high school and they didn't have me and they couldn't solve some of the most simple problems. And I kind of had this light bulb of like, Well, no wonder I'm not teaching them to do any of that. I'm doing it all for them. And so, it's a great point your student made. Like how often are we giving the opportunity? And look, I'm not going to lie to you. Does it take more time to give someone the opportunity? Yes, absolutely. But in reality, that's our goal as teachers. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? That this is what's going to give the skills needed for our students to be successful once they leave us. And so, I really come from the school of thought that this is as important as Algebra 1, as geometry. Like these are the life skills that folks are going to need. So that's a great point. Thank you. I also saw the fear of failing or doing it wrong. Guess what? Adults have that fear too, right? I mean, that's a great comment, and we've got to understand. I think for teachers too, right? We've got to get away from this failure is a dirty word, and don't get me started on grades and all that stuff because I'll talk for hours. But we've got to get away from this idea that everyone's supposed to do everything perfect on the first try or even the second try or the third try. That's not reality. There's some things I did great on the first try. There's a lot of things that it was like the 10th try, right? I shouldn't get a D because it took me 10 times, right? I should get a high five because I finally did it. And so, that's a great comment.
Chad, I know that when we talked previously, you talked about this this transition to college particularly, right? And how that first year you were trying lots of different things that you never tried before because you had the sense of freedom. My question is to you, like, did the first things you try always work? Or was there like this try and fail and then try something different? Like, can you give some like examples of what that might look like?
Yeah, so I did go through a few things. I knew that that was one of the big things that I wanted to do when I got to college was try to get organized, because one of the things I was very lax about in high school, and it kind of showed in my grades a little bit. But I always tried to like keep a track of everything like in my notebooks or in my head, and it did not work out very well because when you've got 5 classes to keep up with every single day, or like 3 one day and 2 one another day, it doesn't work very well. So I knew very quickly that I needed to map things out, and it made it easier if I had a giant like how everything was going to be for the month or like the week, and then I could use like notepads to keep lists of what I need to get done today or tomorrow. And so it was more of just finding what works, and that was the good thing about being a freshman. I could try a lot of different things because you don't really know, you're going in there all alone. So but yeah, that was definitely one of the things, just trying new things and see what worked, and thankfully lists and giant calendars worked for me.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important piece, right? Like, particularly when we think about accommodations, even related services and what they look like. I hope I'm talking Texas language. Let me know if I'm not. But I think if we think about that, accommodations are growing and changing with our young adults as they grow up through the lifespan. It's about trying different things on, trying to see what fits. And if it fits one year, great, but don't expect it to fit the next year, and that it's kind of changing. And I think that's that piece of autonomy, is like trying it and say, does this fit? It's like kind of almost asking, like, does the shoe fit? And if it doesn't, then we leave it go and we try something different until we find what works, given the context of what students are trying to learn and how they're trying to learn. Chloe, I know that also, this thing of barriers is really, I think, a big piece, because I know we're all scared of failing. We're all scared of like not reaching our full potential. And I know for you that like, that oftentimes some of the barriers for you have been more like relational, because people almost implicitly expect that they need to help you. You want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. That's a great topic. Yes, I do have stupid. Yes, I may need some help, but I found out over the course of my life that I don't always need help. I don't always need somebody there to hold my hand or talk for me or whatever. I am a very independent person. And yeah, I ask for help when I absolutely have to. But most of the time, I got it. For example, this morning I was getting ready to get in my chair and I realized my wheel was stuck on the blanket, so I couldn't get in my power chair. I had to get in my manual chair, which was in my closet. So, okay, what will I do? I get on the floor by myself and crawl to the closet, get my manual, get into my manual, which took a little while, but hey, I did it, and I made it to class on time.
Well, Chloe, I can tell that you are extremely independent, and I love your story that you just shared. Thank you so much for telling us about that example that with your chair. So you're doing a fantastic job.
Can't believe you got to class on time, Chloe. That's pretty impressive.
I know, I was like, oh my God.
I think that really reiterates John's earlier point, right? Where we are sometimes as educators super stuck on like efficiency and getting things done quickly. And we know that we could do it quicker, but what is taken away if we do that when Chloe could do that for herself? And I think that the like come back to that idea of being able to practice something, right, on your own. There's a certain level of dignity in being able to do that. And I guess the one thing that I know that particularly in Chloe and I's relationship is that one thing that we opened up as I started working more and more with her is, Chloe, if I ever step on your feet when you want to act, you have permission to call me out. And I think that as educators, we need to like be open to that because like, I don't, when John would intervene in his classroom, I don't think he's inherently trying to do something bad, right? Or if I'm trying to help Chloe, I'm trying to be helpful. But sometimes in that process, we're actually creating, we're enabling kind of not self-determined behavior. And so I think that that idea to have permission to advocate and say, hey, you let me know when I overstep. And I think that's really important.
And you know, I always do.
You always do. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
always tell
think,
me because it's
I
pretty
think,
daily.
I think the important piece here is that just to go back to the one pager, right? And so this feeling of and opportunities to practice, this feeling of trust that I know that if Chloe needs help, she's going to ask. Okay, because we've got a relationship, we've built trust, and that kind of starts with that one pager, right? And I think what happens is when we dive in all the time is we feel like, that A, that's our job, and B, we don't trust that whoever we're trying to help is going to ask for help when they need it. And so sometimes that is as literal as having a conversation, right? Where, whether it's a conversation with Chloe or Jonathan or chat, hey, I'm going to lay off, but know that I'm here. But if you're going to need something, you're going to have to ask me for it. And then when you ask me, I will jump in and I will help you, right? Because otherwise, we go into education because we're helpers. It's a helping profession. And it's very hard to unlearn behaviors of, running in front of Chloe and opening the door. Well, she'll tell me sometimes, I can get the door myself. Leave me alone. Get out of my way. You're slowing me down. And so just kind of understanding that trust that, they'll ask for help when they need it. Now that's where we come in as teachers, right? We need to teach our students how to do that appropriately and what that looks like and when to do it, right? Because, sometimes my youngest daughter's feeling kind of lazy and she'll ask for help before she's even tried anything. And if I'm not paying attention, I'll go help her. Whereas sometimes I just need to say, hey, how about you try that first and then let's see what happens, right? And then giving ourselves permission to look, that doesn't have to be the way we go through life 24/7, right? As a parent, there's sometimes where we're running late and I've got a meeting and guess what? I'm throwing you in the car because that's the fastest way to do it. Okay. And that's just life, right? And so there's a balance to all of this. Great story, Chloe.
All right, Jonathan, I'm going to come to you in a little bit, but I really liked how we got a few comments from groups. So this is my next question that I'm going to pose to Jonathan here in a little bit. So Jonathan, you have like a little bit to think on it. And I'll draw you out on it because I have a direction I think that we talked about previously, but we might have to work at it a little bit. So my next question is, if you could identify one person who supported you to be autonomous or to act with autonomy, who would it be? And what did they do that lets you be autonomous? Try to think about one person in your life that lets you act with autonomy. So I liked what I saw in the chat box last time.
So for me, is it okay if I go ahead now, Kendall?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
And feel free to put stuff in the chat box, guys, if you have some thoughts on that.
For me, I am a daycare teacher. I'm a lead teacher at a daycare for second grade students. And so having the ability to feel free to create my lessons how I want my students to be engaged, but also have my boss there whenever I need help to go and ask for it, she'll come and help me. So I think just having the ability to be free, like Chad said, like college freedom, but trying and failing at things so you know what you need to work on to do better the next time. So I would say that's my most concrete example of that.
Good. And I'm going to draw you out just a little bit more. So you said to me, so when you have someone in your life who lets you act with autonomy, what do you then give to your students?
So when I have someone who's able to give me autonomy, I'm able to reflect on that and give it back to them. So for instance, when I have a student, and it's just going back to the self-control and the behavior, when they're acting out of term and doing something they're not supposed to, instead of just automatically sending them to the office when John said it could be over in 2 seconds, I give them the opportunity. I say, you can either go to the office with Miss So-and-so, or you can sit down, write about what you did, and we can reflect on what we can do better instead of having them automatically go to the office and giving them that choice to decide what they want to do.
Yeah, I love that. So it's this idea that like autonomy builds on autonomy, right? Like
Right.
I think about the nature of my work, right? So like John is my boss, right? John gives me a lot of autonomy to do good work, right? And to think the way that I think. And then that reflects in the way that I treat our youth leaders. And I would hope, and I know for a fact, right, that the interactions that our youth leaders hold is autonomous towards those other people. So autonomy breeds autonomy is really kind of the message there. I love that.
Somebody
Chloe,
shared in the chat,
Go.
Kendall, that someone shared that their teacher lets them try and fail things at school, which is, I mean, that's great, right? That's, as I said before, that's really what school should be, right? An opportunity to try things and fail and then try again. That's what we're kind of looking for. I am curious if I can just ask chat real quick, because it kind of came to my head. You know, chat, you talked a little bit about how you got organized once you left high school, went on to college. And was there, I just, you know, I'm in schools all the time, and it just seems like you go from high school, which is just inherently not very autonomous place, no matter what high school you're in, right? To college, which it's like the ultimate in autonomy. I mean, you're literally just dropped off and you're on your own. And
Yeah.
so is there anything specific in high school that you can think of that you know gave you some skills to let you be that enabled you to be successful in college? Anything that you can think of?
I'm not sure. I know like my senior year, I was starting to get to that point where I'm like, I'm ready to be out of the house. Let's go, let's go. Like, I'm tired of this being in the same class for 8 to 2 every day. And it's just, I was tired of the same schedule. I was ready to get out of it. But I originally wanted to go into biotech before I went to sports management. And we got to like kind of, when I was at like a special place outside of school, we got to choose where we want to do our internship. And that really helped me because it actually helped me determine what I didn't want to go into. So rather than just going and saying, hey, I wanted to do this, I was actually able to go to that internship and realize I don't want to do this. Let's find something else. So that really helped me decide that the choice of going to this internship, it was a failure if you think about it, but it really was a success because it allowed me to say, I don't want to do this, and didn't waste time and energy and rather found something that I'd rather else do. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example, right? Great example of how building in all these different opportunities. And, you know, I would say it's just as successful to figure out what you don't want to do than it is when you figure out what you do want to do, right? Because if you can, I can't tell you how many students who are juniors in college who are like, you know, I think I'm going to switch my major. And I'm just like, oh my God, who's paying? Because you're going to start all over. And so building in even tiny opportunities, you know, in school and at home and in the community to start building that autonomous behavior, because no matter what happens after high school, right? Whether it's a job, whether it's military, whether it's college, no matter what happens, it is a very different environment, right? You're going from a pretty controlled environment to a environment where there's just all sorts of choices flying at you. And so figuring out ways, just little ways to build in choices and build autonomy is crucial for any kind of transition.
Chloe, did you have anything to add to, did you have a particular person in your life that was like super influential in building that rebellion, super independent person?
Yeah. Ambitious. Good. Out of the blue. But my best friend, has always been like, now you can do whatever you want. And I'll be there to support you, but you got it. Basically, and he's been there to everything. We met in the grade interview, an idea of how long we've been but yeah, and yeah, just like, oh my God, that way, but he's number one.
Yeah, and I think that when and I don't know if I think it's like maybe April we'll talk about relatedness as kind of the feature. I think that will resurface as you'll start to see how autonomy and what we'll talk about next month and competence, how those are all kind of interrelated to each other in some ways, and the relationships we hold can help us feel autonomous and kind of feel in control, or vice versa in that regard. It can also make us feel out of control if our relationships aren't positive. So I'm sure we'll revisit that, but that's a great example.
And I know you have another question, Kendall, but before you ask that, I want to just want to hit on this point too. And so a lot of the times, even with Undetermined, we've learned by failing, right? And sorry, barking dog. We've learned by failing. And so a lot of times with self-determination, we break it down into the core components or elements of self-determination, and we teach them in isolation. We teach choice making, we teach problem solving, but we're just doing these lessons and it's just problem solving. And what we're finding is a couple of things. One, if we're not focusing on this topic, autonomy, next month competence, and the next month relatedness, if we're not building those three pieces into what we're doing, the skills will never get generalized, okay? And so if you look at the post-school outcomes for youth with disabilities across the country, okay, those numbers have remained stagnant for 30 years, okay? So, and they're not great, right? And so what we're gonna learn over these next 5 sessions is how to do things differently to get better outcomes. So the one thing we've done with Undetermined is we've achieved positive post-school outcomes, right, for our youth. And how we've done it is taking these core skills, looking at building autonomy, competence, and relatedness, right? And so that once I know how to choice make, and once I know how to feel autonomous and have the skills to act autonomously, I can then go out and make choices and solve problems, et cetera, okay? That's what we discovered in the past year or so that isn't happening, right? I'm teaching problem solving in my class, and then we move on to the next thing, and I teach that, and then it just stops. And so, you know, as you're kind of hanging out with us over the next 5-6 months, you know, really be thinking about, yeah, maybe I'm doing some of this stuff, but how can I do this a little bit differently? So I'm starting to build some of these base skills into my students. Or if you're a student and you're listening to me, how can I start acting in ways that are autonomous, right? And so if you're in a situation where you feel like there's no choice presented, you know, the first thing to do is say, hey, is there possible for me to do this a different way? Okay. And ask the question. It never hurts to ask, right? And so, because I really think that's what we need to be focusing on while we're in school right now, right? Building those behaviors so that once you get out, you're going to end up, you'll be able to navigate some of these barriers that life throws at you consistently.
Yeah, that's a good segue, I think, to this next question, which is, if you have advice that you give yourself, youth leaders, or advice that you would give to others about autonomy, what would that advice be? It can be about how you practice it. It could be about who to surround yourself with. Anything's on the table, but I think you have a lot of people who are listening who would be curious as to what advice you would give them as they're trying to develop autonomy in their own lives.
Oh, go. You have a job. Tell me you can't just give up on it. 'Cause that's not how it works. You gotta keep looking at it over time.
So are you saying autonomy doesn't come free?
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly what I'm saying. It does not come, but I mean, nothing in life comes free, but that death is redundant.
Yeah, that brings up a great point. So like the one pager, right? I worked at the middle school level, and we used to do the one pager multiple times a year because I recognize, like particularly in middle school, like developmentally, a lot of things are changing, right? And so while your interests might be one thing one semester, it could be something completely different the next. And one thing that I learned years later, when I went back in the role that I'm in now to visit a student I had who was now in high school, and I pulled out their one pager, and their teacher had never readdressed that their one pager would change. It was still the same thing that I put on that with them as seventh graders. And to me, that gets to what Chloe's saying, right? Is that autonomy doesn't come free because you have to continually self-advocate for the things that you want, need, and are interested in. And so it can't be this process that I say at one time and then you just expect it to kind of happen for life, because you're going to change. All of this, you students are going to change. And as educators, we need to be responsive to those changes. And the ways that we can do that is when there's advocacy there. So if you look at Jonathan's background, right? Nice job. Can you kind of do the point to the orange one? See if you can do that. Yeah, look at that. Well done. Self-advocacy is one of our primary elements, right? And I think it fits perfectly into this idea of really getting to autonomy. Without it, I don't know that we can fully actualize autonomy. So great point.
I think, yeah, and I think Chloe made me think too. So, I mean, just to be thinking about the importance of self-advocacy, right? And we picked, youth leaders with different disabilities for a reason. And because the fact of the matter is, if you don't know Chloe and you have no knowledge of disability or disability awareness whatsoever, right? the reality is, and Chloe's experiences, people see Chloe and they set a low bar. Okay, they see someone who uses a power chair, and when they hear that she's a college student majoring in journalism, their minds are blown sometimes. So she's constantly advocating the low bar, right? Sometimes with someone like a hidden disability, right? Where people look at you, but they don't see that you might have an auditory processing delay or dyslexia or whatever, right? You're advocating just in a different kind of way, right? Because you got to say like, hey, I know you can't see this, but this is what I need, right? And high school at times can I know high school can be hard, but you're also surrounded with people who, because you have an IEP or you have your ARD meeting, that with that comes some rights. You get out into the real world and it's just a whole different ball game. And so, advocacy is one of those key skills that, man, if you can't advocate, you're not going to experience autonomy, even if you want to, right? Even if you really, really want to. You're going to have to really focus now. And advocacy is scary. I'm not going to lie to you, right? It gets easier the more you do it, right? But even as an adult, when I need to tell someone, especially someone I don't know, that I need something, right? I still get nervous sometimes, but that's okay. I've done it enough that it's almost like muscle memory. I can just kind of fall back into, and that's what that one pager is for, right? You read the one pager real quick and you kind of refresh, get your little script going, and then you knock it out. But know that, life keeps throwing these things at you. That's why you got to build these skills now.
Chat, Jonathan, what advice you got?
I'll go. One thing for me is knowing it's okay to fail. One of my favorite songs that I listen to when I do fail is Try Again by Aaliyah. And I just listen to it because it's the truth. Dust yourself off and just try again. It's like Kendall and John said, it's going to be okay. It's a learning curve. Everyone fails, but we just pick back up and try again. Also, you can start to be autonomous by just completing the one pager and showing it to your staff that you have when you're, is it ARG meetings, John? Is that right? Okay. In your ARG meetings so that they know what you need to be successful. And I believe you guys can apply for our youth summit that we have coming up in the summer, and we go in deeper conversations with self-determination.
Well, Jonathan stole mine. I was going to go off the players thing too, but it's fine. But another thing that I was thinking of is it's it's easy to try to follow what everybody else does, but it's not always going to work for you. I know in high school and college, and I still kind of do this, is you don't always want to be that person who stands out. And that's okay if you're the one to stand out, because that means it works for you. It doesn't work for them. Trying to do what everybody else does can lead you down a bad path and it won't work for you. But if you find what works for you and you stay to that, then you'll be fine and you don't have to worry about anything else.
Like that. Yeah. And I think like one of the subtle messages that I heard from John and Jonathan that was really interesting is this idea that like there's almost this courage to like put yourself out there, right? And I think that having that one pager, kind of one thing I've heard from youth leaders and students alike is that one pager kind of takes some of that scariness out of that initial interaction with other people. It gives you like almost an assist, right? If you don't really feel confident in saying all those things, you can just hand them the paper. But ultimately, when you can speak all that to other people, that is huge.
And I'll share a thought on the one pager. And again, any questions, feel free for anyone, throw them in the chat. So first, teachers, I encourage everyone to do a one pager. Teachers too, parents too, everyone, right? Everyone needs to have a one pager, and then you need to practice sharing what's on your one pager, right? And so you can practice just with someone in your class, a friend, a teacher, a parent, right? And then as you get more comfortable, you start sharing that with the different teachers you have. You know, we've done this a million different ways. You can record a video of yourself, you know, on your cell phone, kind of going over your one pager and email that to teachers if you're not ready to just dive right in and have a like face-to-face conversation or a Zoom conversation. But just starting, you know, practicing talking about yourself and that's how this starts, right? Everyone really starts with the one pager, and some folks don't ever stop using it. You know, I've worked with kids who are 25, 26 years old and still have a copy of their one pager, right? Some people change their one pager every 2 weeks, you know, because things change. There's no recipe to how often you have to change it, but you definitely want to revisit that thing, you know, as things change. I always say at the minimum, you know, at the half year mark, let's take a look at this again and see if anything's different. But know that that's really the first step in learning to advocate, learning to self-regulate. You know, as you communicate more, people in your life will be willing to give you more freedom, give you more choice, because you're communicating what you need, you're communicating what your strengths and preference and interests are, right? And so by taking that first step, I think you'll find how amazing it is, how things will start opening up for you. But it's a process, right? And just because you master advocating doesn't mean you're gonna have to stop advocating. You know, this is something you'll be doing your entire life, and that has nothing to do with disability. Like, if you have a disability, you just find yourselves in situations where you have to advocate more, right? But adults have to advocate for themselves all the time. That's just a life skill that we're going through. So you're going to be ahead of the game because you're practicing this early, right? You know, a lot of times, and you know, if you go to college or go to the workplace, people who struggle and don't know how to advocate, they don't end up being successful. And so, you know, you're putting yourself kind of ahead of everyone else by already having these skills.
Yes, and I think it was, who is it? Anna, you were the one who was asking for a copy of the one pager. I dropped the link, but again, it's also at the I'm Determined. If one of you guys want to type in the website for the
I
I'm
just
Determined.
actually put a link in the
Thank you.
chat to
Thank
the
you.
one pager, and it will give you all the information on the one pager. And someone asked about the questions that are associated with, so you know how to answer. If you scroll down, there's these tabs, and one says implementation questions, and you can click on that and it'll come up with all the questions that you just saw on John's. If you need like a hard copy and you can't find it, you can always just contact us both too.
And then there's videos there of students, you know, talking about their experiences with the one pager, elementary and secondary. There's also teacher videos. There's also parent videos. So everything on that website's free, fully accessible. And so, you know, just use it as a resource. I think, you know, if nothing else, what we've learned is the power of the narrative and the power of students with disabilities listening to other students with disabilities, right? And learning from their experiences. That's what's made this project powerful. That's why we're working with 40 different states and 6 different countries. You know, it's not about me as the educator getting up here and telling you what I think you should be doing, right? It's listening to the kids that have fought through the barriers, continue to fight through the barriers, and have experienced success and have learned from their failures, right? I mean, that's how, and that's really going to be the theme that we kind of follow through from here all the way through until June, is just one of you know, learning from these folks who have done it, who have walked the walk. And so you know, next month we talk about competence, which is just that feeling that you have the skills to succeed, right? Because if someone puts you in a situation where you're not feeling very competent, the last thing you want to do is act autonomous, right? If someone, you know, throws me out in the middle of the desert with a broke down car, I'm in trouble. I can change a tire, but I can't fix an engine, right? And so I'm not feeling competent, and I definitely don't want to take a chance and try to do this myself because I'm going to make it work. So that's kind of the direction we're heading as we progress through the next 5 or 6 months. I'm just going to pause if there's any last minute questions. I know we've got like less than a minute. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And again, if you visit the website before the next session, again, Kendall's information's on there. So is mine. You know, you don't have to wait all the way until March to talk again. If you have any questions or need anything, you know, please feel free to reach out, and students as well.
We love emails.
Last minute questions from our audience. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. I'm Determined Leaders, John and Kendall.
Nice job, crew.
All right. Well, if there's
Thanks,
no-
guys. Did an awesome job.
Yes.
We'll
All
be in
right.
touch before March, okay?
Yeah, we have 19th on the calendar. I'll send it out via Basecamp.
Perfect.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks,
See you
Ken.
guys.
Thanks, guys.